Assalamu alaikum students, starting with the name of Almighty, the most beneficent and the most merciful. So in the previous lecture we discussed Jean Piaget's theory, stage 1 of his theory, which is known as sensory motor stage. And I told you that during that stage, which starts from the birth till the second year of life, the child's understanding about the world is mainly through the sensory and motor activities. And the concept which is mastered at the end of that stage, stage 1, is object permanence. And you should be familiar with this concept now, that when the things they are out of the sight of the child understands that those things are existing. They have just disappeared for the time being. For example, if you take away a toy from the sight of the child, then the child will not cry, rather child will try to look for it. He or she will search the toy. And same is the case with the disappearance of mother. When mother goes away, then child realizes that she is going to come back. This is known as object permanence. Coming to the second stage of Piaget's theory, which is known as pre-operational stage. Again, in the previous lecture, I told you what is meant by operation. Operation is any mental activity. Now, this second stage, which is known as pre-operational stage, it starts from the 2 years and it remains there till 7 years of life. So that is why it is known as stage of early childhood. Now, the concepts that are mastered during this stage are conservation and reversibility. The very first concept is the concept of conservation. Now, conservation is basically understanding that something stays the same in quantity even though its appearance has changed. It is a concept which basically means that objects retain their identity. There is no change in their shape, in their identity, despite various changes to them. The quantity of liquid or anything else, if it is poured into the containers of different shapes, then there will be change of shape only, and there will be no change in the quantity. For example, if 1 glass of water is poured into a jug, it does not get less in quantity. It just changes the shape. As you can see in this slide. Now, here there are 3 glasses. 2 glasses are of the same shape, which are small, and one is long glass, long and thin glass. Now, before obtaining this concept, if you pour water from the small glass into the longer glass, then the child will see that longer glass has more water and shorter glass has less water. But at the end of this stage or at the beginning of the next stage, the child understands this concept of conservation. Conservation basically means remaining constant. The quantity or amount of liquid remains the same, even though there are changes in its appearance. So, even if the water is not poured in front of 8 or 7 years old child, if you just keep water in 2 glasses, one long and cylindrical, the other one short one, child will see that the amount is the same. Fine. He or she will not say that the longer glass has more amount of water. Similarly, if from a lump of clay you make 2 shapes, one shape of a ball and the other shape of a flat pancake? Because flat pancake seems to be more larger because of its area, the area that it covers. The child will say that flat pancake is larger than the ball, although they both are of equal size. Fine. So this is conservation. At the beginning of the stage, this concept is not mastered, but when the stage is gone, at the end of the stage, this concept is mastered. Then the next concept related to the second stage, that is pre-operational stage, is reversibility. Reversibility is the understanding that things can be brought back to their previous state. Now, taking the previous example, the water from the jug can be brought back into the glass, and then the glass will be filled again. If a piece of paper is folded to make any shape, and after a while when it is unfolded, then it will get the same shape of its simple plain paper. So things, they can be reversed. Same is the case with the numbers. So when the child at the beginning of the stage cannot understand this thing that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, then it means that 4 is equal to 2 plus 2. We say this irreversibility. But at the end of the stage, the child attains this concept. The child attains this ability that certain operations can be done in reverse. If 8 plus 5 is equal to 13, then 5 plus 8 is also equal to 13, or 13 is equal to 8 plus 5. So these two concepts are obtained during the pre-operational stage. So during this stage, the child also starts comprehending symbols, because their understanding related to their word becomes very vast, very wide. So they have the symbols of different objects in their imagination, in their mind. Then another very important thing related to this stage is the concept of centration. Centration means the child cannot understand a thing from, or an idea from, different perspectives. He can only take one quality or aspect into account. Fine. So this is very related with the egocentrism. Egocentrism means that child's own point of view is important for him, and he cannot understand the point of views of another individual. Me, mine, my, these words are very important, and child is unable to understand what other individuals are saying. This is concept of egocentrism. So when the child says one thing and an adult says another thing, then the child will be able to understand his point of view, but not the point of view of another individual. This is centration. Fine. They cannot understand the thing from various perspectives. They can only see the thing from one aspect only. Same example, when the water is poured into the glass, from a long shaped glass, water is poured into a short shaped glass. Then the child does not understand that when the previous glass will be poured with the water again, then the water's quantity or amount is same in both of these glasses. This is centration. They only see the thing from one perspective, only one thing, that from one glass the water is poured into another glass. What will happen next? If from the new glass it is poured again into the previous glass, they cannot understand this thing, fine. And egocentrism, their own thinking, their own viewpoint is very important for them. Then another important, you can say the hallmark of this stage is the development of language. Language is also developed, no doubt. The comprehension of the language is not very meaningful, but language is developed during this stage. Now coming to the stage 3. Stage 3 is known as concrete operational stage, and it starts from the 7 years of age and remains till 11 years of age. And it is also referred to as stage of middle childhood. Now here, the child masters the concept of centration. And after mastering that concept, it becomes decentration. Now, the thinking is not related to one point of view only. The child is able to view things from 2 or more than 2 perspectives. So that is why the thinking of the child becomes decentered. It is not centered. So egocentrism also vanishes. The child understands the viewpoints of others as well. So child also become ego decentered. Fine. So the concept of centration, it now expires at the stage, and the child becomes decentered. Child is able to understand a thing from various perspectives, and also understands the viewpoints of other individuals. And they obtain the concepts of above, below, bigger than, and language, definitely it keeps on developing. The vocabulary, the understanding of the words, it becomes more complex. Stage 4, formal operational stage, starting from the 12 years of life, also known as stage of late childhood. Now here the abstract thinking develops. Before that, the thinking was very much concrete. Here the child can think in terms of abstractions and symbols. Now the child can make hypotheses. Child can try to find out the cause of anything and its effect. Cause and effect relationship can be seen by the child. Concept formation becomes more complicated. Those concepts which are very, very abstract in nature, child begins to understand those concepts, just like honesty, justice, morality. These things gain understanding by the child during this stage. Okay. Now this is the overview of the 4 stages of a child. First, sensory motor from 0 to 2 years. Here, coordination of senses with motor responses. Sensory curiosity about the world. Language is used. Object permanence is developed. Pre-operational, 2 to 7 years. Thinking is symbolic. Proper syntax and grammar is used to express full concepts. These are related with the language development. Imagination and intuition are strong, but complex abstract thoughts still difficult. Conservation is developed. Concrete operational, 7 to 11 years. Concept attached to concrete situation, time, space, quality are understood and can be applied, but not as independent concepts. And then formal operation stage from 11 years onwards, theoretical, hypothetical, and counterfactual thinking develops. Counterfactual means that child can tries to understand the facts and ask questions related to facts if he or she gets disagreed. Abstract logic and reasoning, strategy and planning become possible. Concepts learned in one context can be applied to another. So here the child becomes completely decentered and ego decentered. Okay? Now this was all about the Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development. The next theory is the theory given by Erik Erikson. The next theory is the theory of psychosocial developmental theory given by Erik Erikson. Erik Erikson was basically follower of Sigmund Freud, and you are very well familiar with the name of Freud as you have studied his theory in detail in first year. And he gave a theory which is known as theory of psychosexual development. Erickson initially was follower of him, Freud, but later on he disagreed with him and presented his own theory, which is known as theory of psychosocial development. First of all, you should be knowing what is meant by psychosocial. Psychosocial means interaction between human and society, individual and society. So this theory basically tries to understand the impact of interaction between individual and society and its effect upon human development. His theory is based on 8 stages, and according to Erik Erikson, individual faces crisis in 8th stage and tries to cope up with the crisis. Now that coping strategy can be positive, it can be negative. Whatever method is adopted by the individual, it affects that particular stage and also affects the next stage. Now this is the flow chart of his theory and 8 stages. The very first stage is trust versus mistrust, then is autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, intimacy versus isolation, generativity versus stagnation, integrity and despair. The detail of these 8 stages we will do inshallah in the next lecture. Okay? So till then, Allah Hafiz.